lot of people, a lot of politics in the process. And so local elections growing up, I was always told, this is, if you want to make a difference, focus on your local elections.
Mhm.
That's where the voting can actually make a difference. So, and in fact, that's actually another topic I'm gonna put up here that I forgot. We're gonna
Okay.
talk about taxes.
Great.
All right, we're definitely gonna talk about taxes. Big caps. This is my first time taking notes. Normally, I don't have any. I've never had notes, so we'll see how this goes. But Sam, let's just start out with who you are.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your life. You kind of told me a summary. By the way, this is our first time meeting in person.
Yeah.
So thanks, Jenny Yancey, for recommending. Do you know Jenny?
Just
Or
kind of through Facebook, actually.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. At first, I was like, I don't know. I've got people not really here in Utah and Orem. Most of my audience is in split. It's pretty split, actually. California, Utah, and some random people in Indiana, which I love. But in other states. But those are like the three main states. And so I was like, this may not be super peculiar or super interesting for those outside of Orem. But I live in Orem, and I am interested in it. So tell us a little bit about your life and what led you to become a city councilman.
Sure. So I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, came out to Provo, Utah to go to BYU for school, served a church mission in Idaho, and after I finished at school, then I went out to California to work in Silicon Valley. Loved it out there, met my wife there, great place to live.
Yeah.
And then I started working from home and realized, wait a minute, as much as we love living in California, these taxes and the housing costs, this is just crazy. We could live anywhere.
Yeah.
Why are we still in California? And so
Yeah.
we started looking online and
Did you hear that, Mom and Dad? Why are you still in California?
So we came up to Utah, found kind of the perfect home, perfect neighborhood. Absolutely love it here in Northwest Orem. And actually last year we talked my in-laws into moving from California right next door to us, which we love. It's, when I was first telling people my in-laws are moving in next door, they'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And say, no. This is great. Like we both love having them there and the kids love having them there. It's perfect.
What part of California?
Kind of in the Bay Area, San
Okay.
Jose area. Again, we love going back to visit and things like that, but this is home to us now.
Yeah.
So we kind of moved up here with kind of a 5-year plan of let's just try it out, see how we like it. And I was hooked pretty much right away. My wife, who's from California, lived there almost her life. It took her a little bit longer to kind of say, okay, this is home. But she's definitely there now.
She went to BYU with you. Did you guys meet at BYU?
She went to BYU Hawaii.
Oh, cool.
While I was out there working, and then I proposed and talked her into just sticking around in California. And we actually lived over in London for a little while. I did a work rotation in London, and then she did a study abroad. We kind of timed it so that I was in one side of the city, she was over here, and worked out pretty well. But when I moved into Orem, one of the things I was really attracted to about the city was, hey, they've got fiber internet there. That's perfect because I work from home. I need a fast, reliable connection.
Yep.
And so we moved in. We bought the house. We move in, and I call up Utopia. So Orem is part of this. It's fiber infrastructure. And somebody's.
Oh, someone texting you. I was wondering if it was my phone.
Yeah, the school's trying to notify me of something. So I wanted to get this fast, reliable internet connection. So Orem is part of this partnership, but then find out, oh, sorry, we don't serve your address. And I thought, oh no, I've made a horrible mistake. Like we based not our whole decision on that, but so I started going to city council meetings to figure out, why can only a third of the city access this network that was supposed to be available to the whole city, and about 10 other cities around Utah. And they were, looking at a few different options to try to solve it. And for a while, I was just kind of an activist on that one issue. Like that was the one issue that sucked me into going to city council meetings and voicing my concerns, contacting the mayor and the city council. And after about a year and a half of that, nothing was changing, nothing was improving. And it kind of got under my skin that unless somebody that is passionate about that has kind of the vision and just kind of the technical know-how to understand how to even have these conversations about a topic like this, I didn't feel like anything was going to change. So that's what initially got me interested in running for office. And then a few months before I filed to run, I just scheduled meetings with all of the department directors to understand, okay, to the police chief and the fire chief, tell me what your concerns are for your department. What are you struggling with? What do your officers need? Those types of things. Library, public works, all these things that we kind of take for granted in our daily life, but that's all part of our, no matter what part of the country you live in, somebody is providing you with water. Somebody is taking care of the water. And you just kind of take for granted most of the time. You turn the faucet on, clean water comes out of that sink. But it's been phenomenal for me to kind of see behind the curtain of all the people that make all these things possible and just work, flawlessly. So it's been a really great experience for me to not only not take those things for granted anymore, but also to understand how we can continue to make things better. And you mentioned a little bit about this as far as, federal versus local. Mm-hmm. One of my very favorite things about local government is the problems that we're solving are big enough to matter, but they're small enough that we can actually do something about it. Like we actually have the tools and resources to actually address some of these things, and we're not necessarily tied up in some of the gridlock that people associate with, Washington, D.C. and some of those things. So I really love it.
That's awesome. I actually like that a lot. It's small enough to make the difference there.
Yep.
It kind of reminds me of Parks and Rec.
Yes.
You ever watch that?
I do. We've watched that whole show. We love it.
So my brother worked for Parks and Rec for our hometown, and he couldn't watch it because he felt like it was making fun of them. I was like, no, it's just showing how passionate you guys are, and maybe a little bit of funniness. But it just reminds me of like Ron Swanson, how he fixes that pothole, which in now eventually his wife's house, or in front of his wife's house, and I thought that was just like, you know what, just do it, obviously. I don't know if it's really that easy to just fix the problem, but it's kind of that mentality though. It's like, hey, it's easier to fix it than trying to figure out, Medicare for all and Social Security and immigration issues. But here,
which are important, and they're all not that we shouldn't be interested or care, but as far as what can one person do, sometimes it can be almost demoralizing to think, what difference can I make on that? And it's a matter of time and persistence, and you need to kind of build a wave of support around some of those things. But at the local level, you can actually get things done a lot more efficiently because you don't have to go through as much of the red tape and bureaucracy, and you can just go fix the pothole.
Right. So in regard now, Ron Swanson wasn't an elected official either, so he was just a public servant getting paid and had lots of gold somewhere. But okay, so in regards to you saying, hey, I filed before a few months, I kind of did some research, and then you filed. What was it like filing to run for city council? And then what was the process? Because you're a current city councilman,
right?
And you're running again, running for re-election.
Yep.
What was the process from, hey, I signed the papers, to you made it in and you got sworn in?
So the first time. So
wait, how many times have you done this?
I'm running for re-election for the first time. So I've been in for 4 years. This is my second time running. But
cool. Okay.
So the first time I ran, nobody really knew me. Like, I'm not from here originally, and I didn't have...
You weren't Mr. Orem growing up.
Yeah, that's most of the candidates, and you'll see this in local elections all around. They'll say, I've lived here for 50 years, and we've got, this many kids and grandkids that have all gone to school at this local elementary school, and that's just not my story. I was kind of viewed as the outsider who was trying to shake things up, and there's probably some truth to that, but at the same time, this is where my wife and I decided to take up roots, and this is where we want to raise our family. So while they have the past 50 years to look, we're kind of looking forward at the next 50 years here. And who knows what the future, I can't say this is exactly what my life is going to look like 50 years from now, but we love it here. This is our home, and this is where we want our kids to go to school and those kinds of things. So we're very grateful to be here. But I was. So
you were the outcast as far as what a typical councilman is. And honestly, like Lauren and I lived in Vista for a little while after BYU, and one of my friends was like, "Oh, hey, you should run." I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, yeah, maybe. People know my family. And I looked at all the people, and I see like MBA, just like tons of experience, or someone's already been working with the city and stuff like that. I was like, I don't know if I could do that. But then again, some Joe Schmo kid that I probably should know his name, but he looked like he was like 20. And I guarantee you he had 0 degrees, 0 experience, and he won. So you never know. So, okay, so you run for election, and how many people were you going against? How many positions were available?
There were 3 seats available. So I'm running in what you could call an off year. So we've got 7 members of our council, counting the mayor. So there's different forms of government. Sometimes the mayor is separate. Sometimes he's a member. So in Orem, the mayor is a part-time mayor that's part of our city council. So there's 7 of us all together. So I'm in the year where we've got 3 council members. 2 years from now, we'll have 3 council members plus the mayor up for election. But oddly enough, I think both times that I've run, we've started with 11 candidates. And so the primary goes from 11 down to 6. And then in the general now, we're going from 6 down to 3. So the 3 top vote getters here in the fall will be elected to the city council and sworn in January.
Okay, so you have a 50-50 chance.
Sure, yeah.
This time around. Was it the same time the first time?
Well, it kind of was, but then there was one of the candidates that had to drop out. He had kind of a partner at work that kind of a family emergency that required him to spend more time at work, so he had to drop out. So it started off at 6, but then went down to 5. But yeah, I was trying to unseat an incumbent that was very well known and was outspending me by I think 3 or 4 times, and so there was an uphill battle there. But I tried to just stick to being myself and not trying to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. But I think it really helped the fact that I had done the research up front to understand what the issues actually were and what we could do to actually solve those. I think that started to come through as I was talking to people about, here's my plan to actually solve the utopia problem that we're facing. And it wasn't just the bumper sticker catchphrases and platitudes that a lot of people throw around. So.
Yeah, I know when I ran for 5th grade class president, I threw around a lot of things that I actually thought I could do.
Yeah.
And I could. And I couldn't. So I vowed that if I ever run again, I will not do that. But I also had no clue. I was like, oh, we'll get balls for everyone.
Yeah.
For the courts. It was great. Okay, so you really you felt like you were more realistic. You did your homework beforehand. And I think sometimes it's nice to get an outsider. And I hate to say that. I mean, I don't want to bring Trump in, but one of the reasons why I think a lot of people liked him and do still like him is because he was not a politician. He was different.
Yep.
Did you feel anything like that when you talked to people? Did they go, oh, are you from Orem? Did you feel like anyone said, I'm not going to vote for this guy?
Yeah, I think it might have helped me in some sense, the people that were looking for somebody that wasn't a career politician or something like that. And I still have never really felt like a politician, and maybe every politician says that and feels that way or something. But I decided, my wife and I, as we were deciding if I was going to run again this time, we thought, we'll give it one more shot. I'd love to serve for 4 more years, but I don't want to miss out on my kids' entire childhood and be, stuck in meetings when they're having their awards ceremonies and things. So, I'm willing to do it for 4 more years. I do get a lot of fulfillment out of what I do for the city, but I also enjoy what I do professionally, and so there's kind of a time and season, and for some people that's when they're young and have the energy, and sometimes it's when they're retired and have more time available to dedicate to those kinds of things. But
so you were saying that you were being outpriced dramatically. Do you have your own funds? Do these candidates have their own funds, or do they actually raise money?
It depends. There's one candidate that actually in the primary this time, he's a newcomer and outspent all the other candidates combined, and that was almost all of his own money. Wow. And that whatever, like, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but it just kind of surprised me. I think he might have set a record for how much money a city council candidate in Orem spent for a primary. But
can you share that number?
It was so Orem is a city of about 100,000 people, and we have all citywide seats. So that it might vary from city to city, because sometimes you're running for like a district seat or something, but citywide. So he spent.
Leslie Knope ran for a district seat.
Yes,
anyway,
exactly.
That's all I know about local elections is Parks and Rec. Just kidding.
So I think it was over 20,000. I want to say it was like 22 or 23, something like that.
Wow.
And I only spent, I think it was 500, which was just, get a website out there, that kind of thing. And I had my signs from last time. I will say signs have to be the worst part of the whole process. I hate it. The people putting them up hate it. I actually reached out to the other candidates when we were first, after everybody had first filed. How would you guys feel about just not doing signs? Because it's kind of like eye pollution for the whole city.
Yeah.
And most of them were on board. There were 2 that I think had already ordered their signs. So at that point, all right.
Was it the Jensen one? She's got these huge signs all over the place.
No, that there were two that had already ordered their signs, and so I wouldn't have been fair for me to say, hey, I know that you just dropped thousands of dollars on those signs. Can you just keep them in your garage? We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
It would only work if everybody did
That's
it.
cool, though, that they were open to, some of them said no.
So maybe, hopefully at some point in the future, we can kind of get away from, hey, look at all these signs that are kind of taking over a whole city. It can be more about what are the issues, like what's your plan to actually, address some of these issues that we have in the city and things like that.
I like that a lot. Yeah. Sorry, my hand was in the camera. Oh. So that's what that was. Thanks, Lauren.
Like the I don't know what to do with my hands moment from Ricky
just
Bobby.
Gonna carry him up. Yeah. So, all right. So how is there like a polling that goes on here?
Not that I think there are probably some candidates that maybe do that on their own. Like we'll just have kind of like a phone survey or anything like that. But I think that's one of the more stressful things for the local elections for these candidates is you really don't have a good sense of how you're going to do until election. And granted, they've actually done better with that ballot counting process. So we do vote by mail now, which is phenomenal, and it's doubled and tripled our voter turnout.
And they were sent out today?
They were just mailed out today, so those will be arriving here in Orem here in the next little bit. But as far as vote by mail, it makes it easier because as those come in during the weeks leading up to election, they can already be running those through the machines and counting those. So pretty much 15 minutes after the polls close on election night, they give you the preliminary results, right there. So you have a pretty good idea. There were times in the past where candidates have to wait for days or weeks to have a really good idea.
Count it out. So one time for high school, you had to do some volunteer work or I think do a project, and I did the volunteer work, and I got to skip a day of work or day of school, day of work now, but day of school, and help run an election poll.
Oh wow!
And that was really cool. It was for when Governor Gray Davis in California was being kicked out, I guess impeached, and the governor was running. Yeah. And it was so
as predicted by The Simpsons, right? Or was that
Well, and Trump too. Didn't they predict that Trump would win too? Yeah. I think both.
They've got a time machine, right? That's what the conspiracy theories are saying. They've got a time machine to look at that stuff.
That's one for another podcast. Is the writers of Simpson time travelers. Okay, so anyway, it was very interesting because obviously it was statewide, but we had a lot of people coming, and it wasn't very. I mean, it was all day. It was very, very long, and it was the first time I had, I think, caffeine in my life. Growing up in a house that caffeine was forbidden, and not knowing that it had caffeine. Yeah. But now looking back, that's probably how I made it. But it was very weird because I bring this up because you talk about mailing order of the ballots. And I don't think this was the right way to do it. I don't think the person in charge who went to a special training was doing it right.
Like they got the right memo. They were just kind of winging it.
It was weird. Like he printed out a piece of paper that had all the different parties, and you showed your ID, and then you pointed at what party you were, and then you went and voted. And I was like, what? Like, and some people would be like, why do I need to point this out? I'm like, I don't know. I was just told that that's what you do. Yeah. And now looking at it, I mean, I've always done absentee ballot except for I think one local election. And just because I've always been, I'm actually, by the way, I'm still a California citizen. And unfortunately, I can't vote for you. Okay. Unless I change something really quick. Yeah. I probably will change it because
I think if I remember right, Utah does do like election day registration. So like if you went, so it would be a provisional ballot that doesn't necessarily get counted immediately. Yeah. But in the weeks later as they do the canvassing and stuff like that. So if you're interested, you can still do that.
I kind of want to do concealed carry, and I have to have a Utah license. I can't do it with the California license. Yeah. But anyway, it was just so weird. It was like point at what party you are, and I couldn't tell. Like no one else was looking. It was just me and the person. Yeah. And so it's not like people were tracking it. It's not like you got a special. It was electronic voting, so it wasn't like you got a special chip to say, here's your Republican list of things, and here's your and I do know primaries. If you're not a Republican in California, at least I think that's how it used to be or still is. If you're not a Republican, you can't vote for a Republican candidate for the primaries for the general election, presidential election. Yep. And so I thought that was really weird. So luckily that doesn't really happen here. If you're a citizen, it has your name on it. It gets sent out to you, and then you just send it back. Is that correct?
Yep. You can either mail it back, or they've got drop boxes right by the city center that you can just, take them right there. And then they've got somebody that will verify your signature to make sure that, you are who you say. Because sometimes there will be, let's say, a student that's away at college or off, serving somewhere else in the world, and a parent will try to, just sign for them, but they can, check those kinds of things to make sure that it's actually the voter, and they validate it with the signature that's on file. So
cool. Okay. So is there like checking to make sure there's no voter fraud? How does the city do that?
Well, and I'm not necessarily an expert on like all the nuances, but I know that we've got really well-trained staff. And one of the nice things about vote by mail is it's consolidated it. So we actually only have one voting center on election day, because most people, even if they're voting on election day, will just take the ballot that was mailed to them, drop it off in the drop box, and that way they don't have to wait in line, or if they've got to go coach a soccer game, or those types of things, it's just drop it off and you're done, or put it in the mailbox and you're done. But the one important thing to remember, if you're here in Utah, make sure that it's postmarked by Monday the 4th. Because if you try mailing it on election day, it won't get counted. It has to have a postmark the day before election day.
Got it.
So
cool. Good to know. How many would you say vote like last minute versus early?
I'd have to look at. I don't know offhand like what percentage are kind of last minute versus voting early, but I think our voter turnout for the primary was about 26%, which still kind of sounds dismal. You think like, only a quarter of the people that are registered to vote are actually voting, but it is still better than where we were, a few years ago before vote by mail, where it was 9, 10, 12%, something like that in a municipal primary. So we're getting better. We still have a lot of room to grow, but we are getting better.
Cool. So you win one of the 3 seats. Mm-hmm. How many votes did you get?
I want to say it was a little over 8,000.
Wow.
So it's kind of humbling to just kind of realize that there are 8,000 people in this community, most of whom don't know me personally, have maybe seen my website, or maybe seen like a Facebook ad or something like that. But
or they just go, Sam Lentz. That's easy to say.
Yeah, just kind of like a darts on a dartboard kind of thing. But
don't vote like that, by the way, guys. Do not vote like that. And also, don't vote party line. It's okay to vote outside of your party. Okay.
One thing I've actually loved that our city has done is, and this is something that you should really encourage your cities to do if they're not doing it, they have an election page that has a profile in each candidate, so we can put our photo and kind of our 200-word blurb introduction, links to our websites or Facebook pages or whatever. And it's one of the things I love about the vote by mail system is you get your ballot in the mail, you're sitting down at your desk or your computer or wherever, you see what's actually on the ballot, so that you know exactly, this is what I need to research. This is the decision I'm going to be making. These are the candidates that I can choose from. And so you can just kind of go through, over the course of the roughly 3 weeks between when ballots go out and election day, and you've got time to really do your homework on that stuff to get it right.
That's cool. Yeah, that's one of the hard parts for me as a absentee ballot. I get my packet, and I don't know who 3/4 of these people are. Because and that's another reason why I'm like, maybe it's time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time. It's basically been 15 years that I've not lived, like really, really lived at home, minus the 2 or 3 years that I did. And so it was, it's hard. So it's nice to kind of be like, hey, this actually impacts me. Because there's a lot of someone who's like, this isn't. I mean, I really wanted to do it for the presidential votes. That at least that like, hey, there's that vote for that third party. I usually vote third party when it comes to presidential elections. But just
can I interject something
please.
On that? So I'm never going to discourage somebody for voting for U.S. president, right? Like vote in every election you get a chance to. But you think, what are the odds that your individual vote are going to decide who the next president, like who takes the White House? It's not impossible, but relatively low, right? Because you would have to be the swing vote in your state, and your state would have to be the swing electoral votes to decide the election, right? But you think about, what is your chance of deciding your local election? Like who's going to represent me as the mayor or my city council member? We actually had our neighbor to the west, Vineyard, a few years ago. They had an election where it actually came down to a tie, and the election was literally decided by rolling the dice. Like that's how they decided who won the city council
That's
seat.
not the current city council or mayor. Was it mayor?
I want to say it was like 2015.
Oh, okay. So it was a while ago.
It was one of the city council members.
Back when it was about a tenth of the size it is now.
Yeah, it's grown like crazy over there. But yeah, it's just kind of, these local elections matter because, first of all, your vote actually has a pretty good shot to make a difference.
Yep.
But also, these are people that are making, impactful decisions with how much is your water bill going to be, or, when is that pothole going to be filled, or how many police officers are we going to have? Are we going to get a new fire ladder truck? All those types of decisions. So these are things that will actually impact your household on a regular basis.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And I will be called to repentance, and I should file here in Utah. I mean, I own a freaking house in Utah. I should probably finally do it. I just kind of like having that California license plate or driver's license.
If nothing else, that's my goal today, is to get you to register to vote here in Utah.
I appreciate that. It wasn't the concealed carry class that said, "Oh, sorry, you have a California driver's residence." No, I agree. And there's definitely like the Utah State Senate. I really wanted to vote in that last one that we had, and of obviously upcoming ones, and I definitely need to. It's just kind of like, oh,
I don't want to lay the guilt on too heavy, but just kind of help people understand, like, this it really does matter. Yeah. And this is your chance to kind of be a part of deciding that future for your family. Right?
Well, I think I for years I was at BYU and going to school and not really sure I was going to stay here in Utah. So it was really easy to just kind of like, okay, we'll just keep going. And I mean, I do usually know who's running for local elections, like councilmen. Yeah.
Council members.
There you go. Because it's not counselors.
Yeah.
Council
we gotta
members.
be inclusive with our terminology.
That's
here,
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What are we, San Francisco?
Yeah.
All right. So council members, and then also like I usually knew who the mayor was, so I did vote in that regards, and the school district and things like that. That definitely I felt like I was making an impact there. But it's time. I think it's time that I'm here. So when I get it, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right,
Great.
and hopefully I do it before election. So so you made it. So now let's talk about what you've done since. It's been almost 4 years.
Yep.
You talk about Utopia.
Yep.
That was something that I didn't realize that was here until I moved here. And Utopia advertises like on Facebook all the time.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, sweet, I'm gonna get this. And every time I'm like, oh, it's not here.
Yep.
Sorry, it's not in your area.
Yep.
Like, well, when is it? And they go, well, we're working with the city and we'll get it going. And then down the road from here, there was an area that had signs like, oh, drilling for Utopia. I'm like, oh, they're gonna make it. And they didn't make it. But then they did it this year. Like when was it? Last month? It was awesome.
So you've got the fiber lines out there, but just not actually like on yet.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're
in the same boat now.
Okay,
so,
cool.
Yeah.
So we actually don't get it turned on or like finalized until like a year from now. So September 2020, I think.
And I think that actually just changed. So I looked at because I think we're actually in the same footprint. So they are actually running ahead of schedule quite a bit. So for years and years, there was just this ethereal, who knows when all these neighborhoods are going to, like, nobody knows. Like, there was just no plan. There was no schedule. Now we actually have a plan. We have a schedule, and we're actually running ahead of that schedule. So that was, we wanted to kind of put out the conservative. You kind of want to under-promise, over-deliver.
Yep.
But right now we're, running full steam ahead, and things are moving quickly. So I think it might be Christmas or early next year for our footprint. So
nice.
I'm excited.
Is it because of you that we got this done?
So I've definitely been advocating passionately for, like, this has been my passion project on the city council, but it's certainly not something that one person could have done
by themselves.
You're talking about a partnership between essentially 11 cities. There's some other cities that are part of it too, and you have some smaller communities that have seen the success that we've been having recently and are now joining in, and they're backing their own bond to join. But we already have all the infrastructure in place. Like, we have the fiber ring backbone in place. We've got the network operations center, the partnerships with dozens of ISPs. That's actually one of my favorite things about Utopia. It's not really an ISP.
Yeah.
It's an infrastructure provider, kind of like the roadways that we have, where any make of car can drive on the road. You don't have to have a Ford road or a Chevy road. It's public infrastructure, but you can still choose whatever ISP on that fiber infrastructure that you want. And so we've kind of had some painful lessons along the way, because Utopia used to be kind of a disaster in a lot of people's minds, because financially it was struggling. It was costing the city millions of dollars each year.
Which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
That's because isn't it technically to be for profit? I mean, that the city can make money off of it?
Well, I mean, eventually I would say anything that could be considered as profit will just be going back to repay the city for the millions that we're pouring into it. So,
at this point, yes, but at the beginning, though, wasn't it supposed to be like, hey, we can actually make some money that can be put back into the roads and the police department and all that stuff, right?
And they're, to be fair to the people back then, in a lot of ways, they were kind of flying blind, where nobody else had really done this to the same extent or the same way that they had tried this. And I admire their courage to try to do that. But from a practical standpoint, it didn't go nearly as well as they had hoped financially. And they actually hit issues where the federal government had promised grants to help them build out some of the cities. And then those grants didn't come through when an administration changed. And so we actually had to sue the federal government. Well, no, this is years ago, but we had to sue the federal government to try to get
Obama.
to try to get some of those funds back, and we only got a very small percentage of it. So there were a lot of things working against us. But in 2009 is when the initial kind of inflection point hit, where we started to turn the corner. They came up with a new model after learning from all these painful mistakes from years past. They figured out a better way to do it on kind of a demand-driven model to figure out which neighborhoods can we build out where we can actually, have a decent break-even point and have it pay for itself. And, fast forward several years, and those new neighborhoods that we've been building out are not only paying for themselves, but it's helping us chip into the debt payments that we had from that initial wave that didn't go as well. So so when I took office, and this is not to say like this is all because of me, but just as being part of this project, and I serve on one of the Utopia boards that they have up there that we kind of set the policy and direction for the network. But as they came up with, here's our plan for how we can do this better. Before, the city was paying $3 million a year on the old debt, and then that was going to grow 2% each year. And there really wasn't any growth on the network. Like, we just didn't have money available to add new neighborhoods. Now we have a plan to add all the new neighborhoods, and instead of that $3 million that was going to go up 2% each year till 2040, so that would have been $4.5 million a year.
Interest on.
Well, that was principal and interest on the original Utopia bonds that they had. So now all of the new projects are paying for themselves, and instead of going up 2% each year, we leveled it off, and it's actually going down a little bit each year. So we're not out of the water. Like, there's still a lot of work that remains to be done, but it's an exciting success story now, where it used to be just kind of this, nobody wanted to talk about it, like, and especially like politicians just didn't want to be associated with it, and
especially if they were part of the beginning process.
So that was kind of where I didn't really have the baggage tied to that. I'm here. Let's solve this problem. Let's fix this. And so that's kind of the approach. That I've
kind
taken.
of like a Mitt Romney kind of. Hey, I'm here to fix this problem. As much as he's fixing things right now, or not fixing things, or whatever. We're not going to get into Romney. Okay, so I like that. Actually, we have a Sherry Allen on one of the live feeds. She's got a few questions. I'll ask one of them here. The nice thing about having a laptop next to you, she says, in our household, she says the reason we wanted fiber was that all of us are gamers. So. Good for you, Sherry. You play some games. So 4 people are needing super high speed and unlimited. She wants to know what was the reason why you wanted fiber when you moved here.
Yeah, so the only real option we had from an internet standpoint was Comcast, the cable company, and I've had so many tireless hours. Oh yeah. Just, the customer service calls, like, my internet's been out for 2 hours. When is this going to be fixed? And then not really getting an answer, and then they take you off your promo rate, and it's twice as much, and you have to call and like, hey, how do I get back on the promo rate? And it's just a nightmare from like a customer service standpoint, reliability. So for me, it's not even as much about the speed of it, because for the most part, my cable connection has a decent speed. For me, it's just the reliability. And if I'm so I work from home. If I have like a web conference that I'm hosting, and my internet goes out in the middle of that, and then I'm trying to explain to, my colleagues and one of our customers what they should be seeing on the screen right now if my internet didn't go out, but now I'm just talking to them on the phone about this spreadsheet or this PowerPoint with all this information that it just doesn't work. So for me, it's about having a reliable connection, and fiber, it doesn't get any more reliable than that.
And everyone that I know that has it in other cities in Orem, they always say it actually does cost, at least compared to our internet plan, it does cost a little bit more, but they say it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
The amount of reliability and how fast it is, it's awesome. Now, by the way, here we're live streaming. Oh my gosh, I didn't even plug it in to hardwire it upstairs. I forgot to do that. But luckily the stream seems to be going pretty well, so that's good. But we have, it's a little choppy, but when it's working, the speed's just fine. So Utopia was very appealing to me. And I think it makes great sense. So that's awesome. So I like that alone.
And it's the same speed up and down, not where you have like a pretty decent download speed, but then the upload speed is just this tiny little sliver.
Yep. Well, that's what this is, 5 megabits per second, or megabytes. How do you? Which one of those? Mbps.
When we were growing up, would have been holy cow. That is amazing. But it's just amazing how the demand as the technologies and the applications have evolved. People weren't streaming 4K video on their computer when we were growing up, and it's just
on 3 TVs at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, that's a real thing. It's quite amazing how far we've gone. So, all right. So in regards to Utopia, it's on its way. It's starting to decrease. The deficit's starting to decrease every year, which is awesome. What else have you done? What else do you feel like as a city councilman that you've been able to work on?
So I think probably the thing that makes me the most unique is, and part of this might be a little bit of the generational gap between my colleagues on the council, is I think we're in an era where people expect to be able to access their government on their phone or, on social media, all these kinds of things. So
that'd be interesting. Get some, sorry, I'm going with all the local people, Mitt Romney and Mike Lee and okay. All right.
So, you want to be able to have access to like an app or something that whatever question you have or whatever you need, there's a place that you can go to for it. Now, as one person, I'm not necessarily going to be able to do that for 100,000 residents across the city, but I think just having, it sounds too simple to be like the case, right? But just having a Facebook page as, Councilman Sam Lentz, if you have a question about something, ask me on there and I'm going to get back to it. It might not be right away because I do have a full-time job. I've got, family commitments, other community commitments, but I'm going to do my best. And at the local level, your mayor, your city council, they're typically going to be more accessible than your senator or the governor or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do is just make the process more transparent to make it more accessible. And I'll share one experience in particular. This actually goes back to when I was running for city council the first time. I had talked to somebody on the phone about, why I was running, and they asked if I could bring one of my little yard signs by. And as I was going to deliver it, her husband answered the door. And he started questioning me on, my positions and why I was running. And the way that he was asking some of the questions, it was pretty clear to me that, like, the guy that I was running against, or one of the guys I was running against, had already gotten to him, right? Like, he was asking questions that made it clear that he had kind of this slant, assuming that the city was doing something, inappropriate, when it was actually this other guy that was just kind of twisting the story around. And so I talked with him, and I was just upfront with him that, like, I understand why you're asking that, and if that was the case, I would be upset as well. But let me just explain, like, what's actually happening and what the city's doing to solve that problem. And he went back. All right, let me go see if she's available. So he goes back in the house. Probably, it seemed like an eternity. It was probably only like 2 or 3 minutes, right? But he comes back and he says, "All right, you can put your sign out. Go ahead." And so I'm like, "Okay. Thank you." And I thought, well, at least I have one vote in this household, right? And so I go put my sign up, and then fast forward to election night, or maybe it was the day after that as I was picking up my signs, but I got a call from this woman, and she said, "Have they announced the election results yet? Did you win?" I said, "Yeah, I did." And she said, "Oh, my husband's going to be so happy." And I said, "Really? I thought based on our interaction that he was actually like pretty just, on a totally different wavelength, and we just didn't see eye to eye on things." And he said, "I think you might have been at first, but he appreciated that you were actually willing to acknowledge the fact that you did disagree on something, but there was nuance to it, and you kind of walked him through why you felt that way, and you weren't, dismissive or calling him names or anything, but it was a matter of helping him understand why the city's taking this approach, or why you feel that way. And so for me, it was just kind of a lesson that no matter the temptation to kind of pander to the masses, or to try to say whatever I think people want to hear, but just try to stick true to, I care about getting people access to accurate information, to being consistent, to being transparent. And I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, and I try to acknowledge those when that happens.
You make mistakes?
But it's been, part of it has been that no matter what happens with this election going forward, am I going to have another 4 years in office? I want to be able to look back on the time that I have served without regrets, in the sense that, I didn't compromise, my integrity or my principles or my approach, in the sense that I just wanted to be real with people. And
that's cool.
There are times where I'm talking to, one of our state legislators about something that we disagree on, but I appreciate when they're willing to just be upfront with me about, why they disagree or why they think they're going to vote a certain way, because it just helps me kind of understand their perspective a little better, and realize that there's a reason that we have so many different perspectives on these issues. It's not always as black and white as what some people want to make it out to be, and my side is right and their side is wrong, and here are all the reasons. But there's just so much nuance to all these issues.
Well, I feel like if anything, because you're going, essentially it sounded like you're going door to door, right? Mm-hmm. You could have just said whatever you wanted to get them to say yes, to put a sign down.
And I think there are probably a lot of people that do that, and sometimes
I should laugh, but that's crazy.
Sometimes it's probably a successful strategy. If you put very little information on your website, for example, or, your literature, and it's just, hey, look at these beautiful pictures of my family, and I'm a nice guy, and I've lived here for a long time, but you don't really take any positions and make those public, then when you're talking to those people, you can tell them whatever you want, and they have no choice but to believe you, right? Yeah. But my approach has been really different, where my website is like, if you stacked all of the other platforms on top of each other for the other 5 candidates, I think mine was like 2 or 3 times longer, just like my website. And now, granted, I realize that a lot of them have positions.
More SEO.
Yeah, that they've talked about where maybe it's not on their website, but I try to be consistent, where if somebody over here asks me this question that has this perspective, and somebody over here that has a different perspective asks me that, I want to be able to give them the same consistent answer. Like, I'm not a different candidate, or I don't have different positions depending on who I'm talking to. And so I think just kind of having it on my website, on my Facebook page, and things like that makes it clear that, okay, this is where Sam stands. I might not agree with him necessarily, and I can let him hear that. But it's just easier to be consistent than try to remember, what I said to each person or each group. So
I like that, because it keeps it real, keeps it honest, and I think there's going to be more people like that. And the unfortunate part is that, especially in today's world with everything so accessible, especially for the federal, state and federal elections, you can go, wait a second, you said this at the last rally, and then now you're saying this. You're saying a moderate. In the last one, you said that you're a hardcore liberal. Like, which one are you? Where does this fit? And I think every politician, kind of to an extent, does it. Again, federal and state, and that's again a kind of a nice thing about the local, is that at least, well, we probably don't do nearly as much fact checking.
There just aren't as many like media resources with 18 cameras on somebody. Sometimes you're relying on like one local newspaper or something like that to be able to cover all those kinds of things. So it varies from a big city to a small rural community. You're going to have varying situations, but it's an interesting challenge of trying to keep people honest when they're going from one conversation to the next.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I like that. That's good. So, and I believe you that that's the case, because you could easily
wait till
just
I do the next podcast next week and I tell them something totally different. So.
Hey, your contenders or your competitors are going to take that soundbite and put it on theirs. This guy's already admitted that he's going to change it. All right, I'm sure your competitor. What's the right word? Your contenders.
The other candidate. You could say opponents, but I will say there's no like terrible, awful person in this race.
Yes.
So. No matter what happens 3 weeks from now, like I think Orem's going to be fine, but I'm hoping that people will see me as one of the best 3 people to carry the city forward.
That's cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about some of the stuff that I think are hot topics, at least locally. But I think it's also good for people to understand, like, oh crap, like, oh yeah, the city needs money. So from what I understand, the police department specifically was kind of bleeding as far as its talent.
Yep.
They were going to another popular city. Correct me if I'm wrong, Salt Lake City.
Well, I mean, it was kind of all over the state. It's not necessarily just in Orem, but we just had issues where there were a couple departments, even new departments like Draper Riverton. They just opened up a new police department, and so it was kind of open season of like,
you can move up.
I want to get this guy from that city and this guy from that city, and so if people are willing to pay more, then it becomes an attractive opportunity for a lot of people. So I'm not going to say anything, bad about the officers that left if they're, they have families to provide for and that's their career, right? Yeah. So it's more power to them if they can find a better situation for for themselves and for their family. But we were kind of, our turnover, we had a big spike. And so one of the things I proposed this year as a city council member that I never expected to do was a small property tax increase. And it came out to about $1 a month per household. So we're not talking about, some massive thing that's going to bankrupt people, but that allowed us to hire 4 more police officers. And it also helped us free up some budgets so that we could allocate more money to compensation. So we instituted a career ladder program so that if somebody had been with the force for a certain length of time and had these certifications, they could move up to become an officer 2 or an officer 3 or, different levels. So you're not necessarily changing your job responsibility, but you're being recognized for the service and experience that you have. Because you think about, if you have a 911 call and an officer is coming to help you in your family's crucible moment, right? Like life-threatening situation, the police officers or the firefighters you want to arrive are the experienced guys that have been around the block a little while, right? That know what to do in these tenuous situations. And
so they can, not only they can take care of you, but also they can train the next generation.
Yep, exactly. And so we had this challenge of if we're losing our best trained, most talented, or I'm not sure talented, most experienced people on the force. And I love the enthusiasm and the passion of some of these new guys, but they need somebody to show them the ropes, right? And so we needed to invest in our people so that we could invest in the future of the department and in our public safety within the community. So, part of the challenge that we have too in Orem specifically, every community is going to have a different way of balancing their budget, right? And there's a lot of communities throughout the nation that don't have a balanced budget, but in the state of Utah, it's actually required that we have a balanced budget. By law,
that's cool.
We have to have a balanced budget.
Dang, can we please do that federally?
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, dang it.
But part of the challenge we have in Orem is we're really dependent on sales tax revenue. So, every city is going to have different sources of revenue, but that works great for us when the economy is doing well. When people are shopping at our mall and at our stores, that works out great for Orem because that keeps our property taxes crazy low compared to some of the other communities around here.
Really?
But then when the recession hit in 2007, 2008, we got hammered economically because our sales tax revenue dropped by about $4 million. And so we have to figure out, okay, how do we balance our budget when it's not like we're having fewer crimes or we're having fewer medical emergencies, like all these things that the city is responsible for.
You still have the same population.
Yep.
You still have the same statistics of, hey, with this population, we have this many ambulance rides and whatnot.
Yep.
Okay.
We're still, flushing the toilet. We're still, all these things and we still have roads. And so we had to make cuts across the board. So this is well before my time. I didn't
Maybe
start.
That's why Pleasant Grove has so many potholes.
Yeah.
Darn recession.
Okay. So I didn't take office till 2016. This is before my time, but they had to face some really difficult choices because they made cuts across the board, essentially. And even, the police department, our police force dropped considerably during that time. And so in the years since the recession, as we've rebuilt, we've tried to rebuild ourselves in a more resilient way so that if and when another recession hits down the road, and this isn't like some kind of forecast that, doomsday, it's going to hit next year, but at some point the economy is going to, have a downturn at some point.
It's a cycle.
Right.
You can't have it always up. There will be ups and downs.
So we don't want to leave ourselves vulnerable so that if that hits again, then, we've got to start letting go of police officers and firefighters and public works technicians and all those kinds because the city still needs to function, right? Like this is still our home. This is still where we live, where we work. We have people going. We have the largest university in the state of Utah here in Orem. There are all these things that the city needs to keep doing. And so I wanted to make sure that as we're rebuilding, we're doing so in a fiscally responsible way.
Did you just say the largest university in the state of Utah?
Largest university in the state of Utah is Utah Valley University, UVU. Yeah.
What the heck?
They've got about 40,000 students now.
Holy smokes!
Now, and they're an open enrollment institution, and
but still,
we're expecting them to continue growing. Not all that growth is going to happen here in Orem. They do have campuses throughout the county,
Vineyard,
and things like that.
Across the freeway. Yeah,
Yep.
Totally. Okay, very cool. Sherry Allen is still commenting, and she says, "Yeah, boo, come back to us, Captain Martinez."
Oh, yeah.
Is he with the police force or?
So he was our public information officer for the police department, and he was amazing at engaging the public. So he ran our city's Facebook, or our police department's Facebook.
Oh, well, whoever is, are they? It was so funny. Yeah. I don't know if it still is that way, but whoever ran that,
they had big shoes to fill. So we had like this many followers when he took over, and then we had. I think it's like 3 times as many followers as the city has.
Wow.
Because we had some
events
that kind of went viral, and we took advantage of that. But it's been great to just kind of help people understand some of the laws that we might not be familiar with. Like people have questions about, I have this traffic situation. I saw somebody do something on the road. I don't think it was legal. And there's like a place you can go and ask a police officer, is that legal? Or no, like you really should avoid doing that because you might cause an accident kind of thing. So, so he actually went to go become the police chief in Springville. So we miss
down
you.
The road.
We miss you, Craig, but happy for you down there. We actually have, Josh Adams, that used to be with our police department, he's now the police chief in Linden. And Matt Pedersen, that used to be with us, he's now the police chief at UVU. And there might be one other I can't think of off the top of my head, but so we're sad to lose those people from our department because they were amazing police officers, right? But I think it does speak to the great work that the police department is doing to build leaders in our community, that these other communities recognize that and say, I'd love to get somebody from Orem Police Department because they're really helping people become leaders and engage with the community in ways that I think kind of run counter to some of the national trends that we see where you have kind of this tension between the general public and the police department, and it's pretty adversarial. It's been one of my favorite things of getting to know how the city functions better, seeing the work that our police department does and our fire department does to have these community events where they get children involved and they help. So I'm a parent, right? So one of the things I love is helping these children understand that when there is something wrong or there's an emergency, this police officer, this fighter, this is somebody you can run to, not somebody that you have to be afraid. This is a safe person, right?
Yeah.
And so I've loved the way that they have really taken that ownership of that responsibility to be leaders in our community and proactively address those issues and that's been part of the challenge with the staffing issues we've had. If we don't have enough people to be focusing on those proactive activities and we're just constantly in response mode and reactive mode, we actually do see an increase in the number of calls and issues that we're dealing with because we don't have the resources to address those things proactively. So when I was proposing that, hey, we want this small property tax increase so that we can fund additional officers in a sustainable way, that if the economy went down next year, for example, the way that property taxes work in Utah, it's designed to stay flat year over year. And so that money doesn't go away next year if the economy dips a little bit and we're not selling as much in our stores, right? Because public safety should not be at the mercy of how much people are buying at the mall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It needs to be a constant. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, you got to definitely allocate the more constant funds or source of income for the city to the safety aspects. Absolutely. Okay, so another question we got was in regards to what do you plan to do in the future, and then also what now that Utopia's working, or at least on its way.
Yeah, we have a plan.
We have a plan. Right? Yeah, you and I both do not have it yet, but we're gonna get it next year.
We could probably make a paper chain, and it would be like that would be a doable project to make a paper chain to the number of days we have till we get Utopia.
Hey, let's do it. We'll put it up there. Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that the idea that we have more affordable housing. Rent is pretty expensive here. And then also the idea of a solar project. Is that correct? Do you want to talk about those?
Kind of. So let's do affordable housing first. Okay. So one of the concerns or complaints sometimes we hear is Orem has just been growing way too fast. We've got all these apartments going up all over the place. And it's a very understandable concern, right? Because when most people moved here, this was a single family home community. There just weren't
farms,
these giant orchards and things like that. And
we have a 100-year-old cherry in our cherry tree in the backyard because it was an orchard here.
Yep, exactly. The spot where my house was built used to be an orchard as well. So like I'm part of the problem in that sense, right? Like everybody that moved here at some point there was some use of that land before they got there. But the challenge that we have here in Orem is we have kind of fixed boundary. We did annex a small portion in Southwest Orem that just became part of the city a few years ago. But for the most part, Orem is fixed as far as how much space we have, and it's a great place to live. A lot of people want to be here, but there's just not a lot of developable land left. And so instead of just building out and having kind of the urban sprawl, there's been more developers looking to build up instead. And it's tough because sometimes I get attacked by, why do you as a city council keep approving all these things? And as a city council member, I only ever voted to approve one apartment complex, and that was right next to UVU, where we needed more student housing. And frankly, it makes the most sense for students to live right next to the university, so they can walk to campus, they can walk to free public transit now. With their student IDs, UVU students can ride the whole UTA transit system for free. But for me, the project was planned well. They oriented it away from the neighborhood, so it was directed toward the University Parkway. So it was planned out really well. But I think part of the challenge is we have a lot of the apartment complexes were approved, say, 10 years ago during the recession. So they got the zoning approval, but then they didn't have the funds available because the economy dropped, and so there just wasn't capital available to build them. But then you fast forward to around the time that I was taking office. So I didn't really vote for some of these projects, but now the developers actually have the money to build what they got approval for years ago. And so you kind of have to fall on the sword and realize that, the perception is, well, the building went up during your time, so that's your project, right? So but
that kind of stinks.
But I think part of the challenge that I'm hoping to address is we have a lot of really nice homes in Orem. We have a few mansions, but just really nice single family homes, and then we've got the apartment complexes and things like that. But what about that middle ground? Like if you're just starting out, maybe you just graduated from college, you have a nice job, but you can't afford, the really big, nice house with the 3-car garage and all those kinds of things. Where's the starter home or the townhouse or the condo where you can start building equity in your own asset, as opposed to, just finding the cheapest rent that you can find somewhere and paying somebody else's mortgage? So the way that I'm hoping to address affordable housing isn't with building a bunch of apartment complexes where you're paying somebody else's mortgage. I'd rather have you building equity in your own home, even if it's a smaller home on a smaller lot, something that you can afford. But I think long term, that's how we address the affordability issue, as opposed to just trying to fan the fire with cheap apartments at an incredible pace.
It's not so much of a how many people can we cram,
right?
How many people that need housing. By the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know this stat, but Utah County is expected to get over 1 million more people in the next 20 years.
Yeah, we're growing at a much faster rate than Salt Lake County because, kind of like I said, Orem is for the most part built out. Salt Lake County, they still have some areas that are developable still, but they're not really going to be able to grow at the same pace that Utah County has, where you've got the southern part of the county, you've got Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, where you have this as of yet undeveloped land where we can keep expanding. So I can't remember if it was 2065 or when, but they forecast at some point that we're essentially going to be the same size in Utah County as in Salt Lake County.
Yeah.
And, I sometimes get the question, well, what are you doing to fix that? And, no matter what I did on the city council, I'm not going to be able to, stop the floodwaters of that happening, across the state, across Utah County. But what I can do is try to make sure that we have a really solid plan to address that, and to manage it in a way that we're not overgrowing our infrastructure and things like that. That we've got roadway systems that can handle it. Because even if we came up with some kind of ordinance that says Orem is not allowed to grow, our population is capped, all the communities around us are still going to grow.
Yeah.
And so you're still going to have people driving through Orem to get to BYU or, to get to the canyon, all over the place. We're kind of right in the heart of Utah County. So even if we found a way to froze our growth, which I'm not suggesting is like the answer.
I didn't even know you could do that. Yeah, I guess you can.
We get a magic wand, so that the mayor gets the gavel, the city councilors get a magic wand.
No more babies. Sorry.
But most of our growth here in Utah is locally grown growth, in the sense that it's not necessarily that we have a ton of people migrating from out. So 70%, it's between 70 and 75% of our growth is from our birth rate here in Utah, right?
Right.
So, and people want to be able to have their family live close by. And some of the heartbreaking stories I've heard on the affordable housing front is, we've got our kids that we'd love to live close to them, and we want to be close to grandkids and things like that, but we just don't have the variety of housing options available within this local radius, so they've got to go live somewhere else in the county where it's cheaper to live. And maybe we'll move out there someday so that we can be closer, but it's tough where you just don't have the diversity in options available. So that's where I'm, we have a lot of single family homes. I think we have a pretty good number of apartments now. Where I'd really like to focus on it, how do we, with the available land that we have to develop, like in the southwest part of the city, how do we, come up with kind of that starter home mentality where people can still afford to live in the city, and ideally they can own it and start building equity in their own asset.
Cool. Ironically, as you bring this up, one of my extended family members, they just bought was it a condo or a townhome? Anyway, they just bought it. They're like, hey, they're newlyweds, like less than 2 years. Mm-hmm. One goes to school, the other one works. They don't have a whole lot of income, but I think they did probably, I don't know for sure, but they probably did the $0 down. Yeah. Get into a home. Might as well pay that to build equity instead of paying for rent. Yeah. So it's definitely happening. In our case, we had a business that we were able to save some money, and when we came back from California to Utah, we were able to put down a decent chunk. So that's, I feel like we're kind of a little bit different in the sense that we save the money, but a lot of people, and I work for a lot of realtors, and a lot of it's like, hey, $0 down. Yep. No worries. Just, we can get you a home, which is cool and also a little scary. Like, oh, whoa, are we running into housing market crash again? So, okay. So let's talk about the renewable energy. Yep. I think there's an element there that is much simpler. It sounds cool, right? But let's talk about how that could work for a local city.
Sure. So, and I kind of joke with people that I kind of became an accidental environmentalist, and it all started with solar panels. So when we put solar panels in, I think it was about 6 years ago. I might have the math wrong on that, but anyway, we were kind of early adopters in that sense that we were kind of getting in where solar is now much cheaper than it was, but we also had more tax incentives available back then. So I was doing the math to figure out what is our break and even point. When will this system pay for itself? And because we qualified for a lot of those incentives, I think it's already paid for itself. Like our having no power bill for the last several years, I think it's already paid itself off.
You personally?
So, yeah.
Oh,
cool. For our situation, I'm not saying for everybody, because the Rocky Mountain Power net metering agreement, we're kind of grandfathered in on the old system, which was much more favorable for us.
Yeah, you're talking about your personal house, right? Okay,
yep.
Sorry.
So that's kind of what got me started on this. But I was, I'm not a tree hugger. I care about the environment, but I wasn't doing it out of the goodness of my heart. I was doing it out of the goodness for my bank account, right? Like I just wanted to save money.
So one of my favorite parts about being in solar is it's good for the Democrats because it's good for the environment, and it's good for the Republicans because it's good for the wallet.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a win-win.
And as far as, how that translates over the city, I'm the council liaison to our Natural Resources Stewardship Committee. So we have these, citizen advisory commissions that will give us advice on how to handle transportation challenges, public works, the planning commission, the library, all these types of things. So one of them is Natural Resources Stewardship Committee. And one of the issues they've been looking at is in Utah, the state legislature just passed HB 411 this last year, which allows cities to declare ourselves as a community renewable energy city. So that would mean that our city, we want to be on 100% net renewable energy by 2030.
Cool.
So that doesn't necessarily mean that all of our power comes from solar, but it means if you take our annual power usage over the course of a year, we want to allocate that portion of, and in the case with Rocky Mountain Power, it would be solar. So they do have, assets with wind and hydroelectric, but for this project, it would be specifically solar. But the idea is if we enter into, or if we make this resolution this year that says that's our goal to get there by 2030, that allows us to be part of the negotiation process with Rocky Mountain Power, who's our power provider here, to figure out, okay, how much would that cost in order to fund that much solar for the city? And what would that mean for people's actual utility bills?
Yeah.
So we can't answer that question yet because we have to figure out how many communities are going to participate in this. So that's why this year is kind of the deadline to say we're in or we're out. Because if we don't do anything, then we're out.
So does this essentially say Orem City has Orem utilities as far as electricity goes?
Not necessarily.
Or are you still plugging into Rocky Mountain Power?
Right. So we would still be partnering with Rocky Mountain Power, but it means that all of Rocky Mountain Power's electric customers within the state of Orem would by default be on solar power. Now,
would that lower their bill?
It depends. It could raise it a little bit. It could lower it, but that's what the negotiations next year will determine. Gotcha. So if we don't do anything, then we don't have a chance to participate. But if we make that ordinance that, hey, we want to participate, that this is our goal to be 100% net renewable by 2030, then next year we're partnering with cities like Salt Lake City and Park City and Summit County and others that are stating that this is their goal, so that we can be part of that negotiation to figure out what would the rates actually be for, Sam Lentz or maybe somebody that's not already on solar, because I don't really have a power bill, but, what would their rates actually be? And then at that point, once, we know what the rates would be, we still have another chance as a city to decide, you know what, I think that's a bit too steep for us if it goes up, or if it's lower, then yes, we're all in. So once we make that commitment at that point as a community, then individual customers, so, homeowners and utility customers could decide if they want to be in or they want to be out. And what we're trying to, we're doing some, really basic surveys with that NRSC group to figure out if your bill went up 5%, would you be willing to do that to know that instead of being on, this percent coal and this percent other energy sources, you're going to be on 100% renewable, and just try to gauge how people feel about it. Because if our community is kind of the opinion that, we don't want to do it if it's going to cost us a penny more, like we don't care or whatever, then it might not make sense for us to, as a community, to decide, yes, we're all in on this.
Yeah.
But again, people would still have, and I think they have 3 months once the program actually starts, and we're transitioning over to this renewable energy program. I think they'd have 3 months to decide as a customer, yes, I'm in, or yes, I'm out. And they could still opt out after that, but then there would be a little bit of a fee. And I still don't know what that fee would be. That's part of the negotiation process next year. But,
$1 million.
Yeah. But
if you don't go green, we will charge you. Essentially, that's kind of what it is, though. Yeah. If you don't go green, we're going to say, hey, there's an extra cost because now you're not using the...
Yeah, because, Rocky Mountain Power has all these assets in coal power, right? And so they're trying to make their long-term decisions of how are we going to be supplying all these communities and all these customers with power for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
So for them to invest in a solar plant that might be replacing this coal plant, let's say, 5 or 10 years before it was scheduled to be decommissioned, there's a cost associated with decommissioning that useful asset before it was, because that's part of it. As part of this agreement with the state, they're not allowed to keep operating any of those plants that are, set for early decommissioning if they're transitioning over to solar power. So it's not just funding the cost of the solar panels, but it's also, addressing retiring this coal asset over here a little early.
So now, obviously, I'm in the solar industry. That's why I get to work from home, because I get to work with all the sales reps across the country. One of my things about solar, I first off love it. I mean, growing up, elementary school, they indoctrinated me on the idea that solar is the future, which it is. Yep. But you look at other countries like Germany, not so much France, because they actually believe in nuclear power, which, by the way, I actually think nuclear power is the cleanest energy and also the most environmental clean energy, I should clarify. But that's a whole other discussion there. But I believe in the individual ability for you and I and others to get solar in their home. But at night, there's no sun, right?
Yep.
So we have to rely on the grid, i.e. in this case, Rocky Mountain Power, to feed us, unless we got a battery, right? And batteries just right now are way too expensive. Yep. Unless you're really rich and you just...
Or if you live on an island out in the middle of the ocean and it's too expensive to get fuel to you.
Yeah.
There are use cases where batteries make sense.
Yeah.
But not necessarily for our case and our situation.
Oh, yeah. So, here where you're in a small metropolis, you're gonna have a lot of... You're going to need the grid because the battery is just not cost efficient.
Yep.
So one of the things, like in places like Germany, is they actually had to turn back on the coal mine or the coal power plants because they ended up costing too much. And so that's one of my worries about in regards to utility companies getting these solar power plants and getting rid of these things that can be run 24/7. One is solar is based on the weather. So you have to deal with, okay, well, today's a cloudy day, and let's just throwing out numbers there. We need 1 million kilowatt hours, and it only produced 200,000 kilowatt hours during the day. And then at night, you need another 500,000 kilowatt hours. Yep. What do you do when you, like for us as homeowners with solar, it gets sent back to the grid, and actually your excess power goes straight to your neighbor's house, which is cool, right?
Although a bunch of them have solar now too, so it's
perfect.
We're expanding it out beyond just our borders,
And that's awesome. And that's part of the reason why I'm kind of more in favor of local individual home solar versus community, because what you're talking about, like, okay, shutting down coal plants. Well, what do you do at night, and what do you do when there's no sun? What do you do? I mean, and the other thing too is the grid's just going to grow. I mean, if we're adding 1 million people in the next 30 years, let's say 30, 40 years, you're going to need more power, obviously. Also going to need way more water somehow, or better management of water. But so what's your response to that? Let's say, I mean, and I'm in solar, so I'm pro solar, but to me, community solar doesn't always make the most sense.
Yep. So there's a couple nuances to that. So first of all, you address the base load issue where, if the clouds are covering the sun, your panels aren't really producing that much. So even during the day, there might be issues where you need to have that base load covered by, coal or natural gas or whatever. One of the things that Rocky Mountain Power has already started doing to help address that is their plants are now smarter where they can ramp up as needed automatically to say, like, all right, if our grid... If we're not getting as much power from all those, homeowners that have solar on their roof, our systems can automatically ramp up how much gas is being fired in our plants in order to power that base load for the communities. So they're aware of that issue, and I think they're probably going to be a little conservative on the ramping down the coal until they're 100% confident that they've got that base load covered. And you still have things like hydroelectric and things like that.
Isn't there a nuclear power plant down the road?
I know there's a natural gas one over.
What is that? Lauren, is that for sure nuclear power plant down there? Anyway, there's just down the other side of the freeway here.
Okay, that one is natural gas.
That's natural gas.
That is natural gas. Yep.
All right.
So as
just
far
as scary.
As far as the base load, I mean, I've seen what's happened in California with the brownouts and things like that.
Oh, especially right now.
Yeah. I think just because their history is kind of based in coal, I think they're going to be a little bit more conservative. And one of the challenges they're also facing is you have these communities in Carbon County and things like their whole economy in Carbon County is based on coal.
Yeah.
And so if you talk about a company like Rocky Mountain Power scaling down their operations, how does that impact their economy? Like I talked about how sales tax can hit our economy. We actually have a pretty diverse economy in that sense, where we've got different industries and different types of companies. Some of those communities out there, like it's coal. That's where, maybe 70% of your population sometimes is somehow tied to, the coal industry. And so they're trying to be sensitive to that as well. And so I don't have the answer. That's not my area of expertise necessarily, but I am confident that they're going to be able to come up with a solution, whatever that looks like, for the baseload question. And as far as, individual versus community, I think one of the challenges we have with the individual side of it is if you have a single family home and you're not in an HOA, then you pretty much have control over that, right? Mm-hmm. One of the challenges that you might have is, and this is something that I was trying to address this last year, but I didn't have enough support in the council to move. It was kind of on the fence. We didn't quite have enough support, but I had complaints from people that they bought a house where there was some obscure, zoning issue because the roof on their shed was too close to the fence line, or some random thing like that. Yeah. Uh-huh. That might not have had anything to do with solar panels, but because they couldn't get permission to get a building permit, then they couldn't get solar panels on their house. Yeah. And so we also have cases where people are in, a condo or a townhouse, and it's not really their decision to make. Like they would need to get the whole community involved. And so I'm 100% with you on like that, individual choice and letting people do that. And I was trying to make it easier to do that here in Orem. And who knows, maybe in the next couple of years we'll get different voices and different faces in there. And
hey,
we'll get
you got a re-election going on right now.
Yeah. But I do think that this helps solve some of the other situations where there's somebody that might want to participate, but they just don't have the opportunity for, any number of situations. It's not only their decision to make whether they get solar.
Maybe that should be my thing when I come to the council, city council
That's going to be the issue that sucks you in so that you run to replace me, right?
No, because you're going to be the mayor after this.
I think that this plan, like this opportunity, I think is a chance for us to be a part of something important, for something, very forward thinking, something that I think would be a very proud legacy to leave to the next generation and things like that. But I do think that we need to have a balanced approach to address, some of the issues that you mentioned. And I think what I care most about, and I'm proud of the way that the legislature handled this, was making sure that every customer or every homeowner could decide if they want to participate in it or not. Because the way the law is written, the costs associated with this program are not allowed to be passed on to people that opt out of the program or communities that aren't participating at all. So it really has to be 100%. The costs need to be borne by the people that are actually benefiting from the program, but you still give people that choice whether they're in or whether they're out.
So essentially you're saying that it'll be easy for me to knock on doors and say, hey, opt out because I'm going to lower your bill instead of raise your bill.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like it's a pretty easy decision to opt in because my bill is $9 a month, right? Like I just have the base,
the connection fee.
Yeah, just the connection fee.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to participate so that whatever kind of base load they're covering for when it's dark out or things like that. I like the idea of that power being provided by a solar panel in the aggregate, right, even though it's not actually running at night. But they're sourcing it from that in the aggregate.
Well, the fact is, the point of solar is that during the daytime you overproduce what you use, and then you have essentially credits or points or excess electricity that are considered credits that cover the nighttime usage. So you're at a net zero or even a net negative, depending on, especially during the summertime. Okay, cool. So, I'm definitely interested to see how that works out. I've seen it in a few other communities, and like Lauren's grandparents, but her parents now live there. They pay dirt cheap electricity. I mean, they moved in the house. They're like, okay, Scott, we're ready to put some solar on. And then I looked at their bill. I was like, whoa, you're paying like 2 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And here, on average in Utah, it's 12 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So this is in Colorado, but they get their power from a windmill. I don't know where, somewhere in northern
Somewhere
Colorado.
windy.
Somewhere windy.
Yeah.
But it's also a nonprofit. So so there's really essentially no profit in this area. And I'm sure the program is very different, but essentially, I mean, it cut their bills dramatically lower than. I mean, I've never seen anyone with 2 cents per kilowatt hour. I mean, San Diego, you're looking at 25 cents to start.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, holy smokes. So, in San Francisco, Bay Area, where you're at too. So, we can talk on and on about solar and clean energy. So, are you do you believe in global warming and climate change?
I do, and it's not necessarily in the sense that the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, but I believe
we got 12 years.
Yeah. I believe in being environmentally responsible and in making choices that leaves things hopefully, if not better than we found them, at least as good as we found them. I mean, that's kind of.
Were you a Boy Scout?
Yeah, I was. But just as far as the approach to, we want to keep leaving things better for the next generation.
Yeah.
Like my parents made incredible sacrifices for me. Their parents made incredible sacrifices for them. Like, that's one of the reasons why I want to run for city council, even though it takes me away from some of those specific family events. If I've got a meeting I have to attend to, but I want to leave this community better than I found it. And I think with the clean air, one of the things that we've actually done as a city, we have the biggest air quality monitoring system in the entire state. Mm-hmm. So it was actually a partnership with Utopia, because they have all these, fiber internet connections. So they would just pop an air quality monitor on there, so we can see at any point throughout our city what the air quality is any time of day. And a lot of people kind of think, oh, that's nice, but why does that matter? Well, where it matters is you might have a family member that has asthma or some other medical condition where if the air quality is red that day, they might not be able to go outside and stay outside for very long.
Yep.
If they're going to school, they might not be able to go to recess and be able to, breathe safely. So that really came up, I think it was last year, with the wildland fire, like Woodland Hills, that whole mountain was essentially on fire. If you looked at the air quality reports from those days, you had red across the board.
Oh, yeah.
And so having that data, I think, really empowers people to make and that's kind of like in the immediate, like, this is impacting me right now. But you just think about the long term. We want to have cleaner air. We want to have cleaner water, all those kinds of things. But I think we all need to work together. And a lot of those changes, it needs to happen at the community level, because I'm not going to be able to do it individually, and so it's been fun having that natural resources committee that can kind of get the word out and promote some of these things. One of the things they're talking about is potentially having an anti-idling ordinance in the city. And it's not necessarily something that we're going to be going out and fining people for and that kind of thing.
Not the idling police.
Right. But it's just to kind of remind people that, hey, if you're waiting to pick somebody up and you're going to be parked there for 10 minutes, maybe consider just turning that off so that you're not, spewing these gases off. Or maybe there are kids standing at a bus stop or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of thing. So
when it's wintertime, pack an extra jacket.
Yes.
Because that's the only time that I really idle, is because oh my gosh, it's cold. And I'm a poor California boy, so.
Well, and now you don't have to worry about idling, right? Because your car doesn't have any emissions,
it
right?
Has zero emissions. Thank you. Yep, just got the Tesla. So actually, that's part of the reason why I got the Tesla, is because I know Utah has some of the worst air quality, mostly Salt Lake City. But, Utah County is not without blame here as far as air quality. And part of it's because of geography-wise, we have these mountains that it's a valley
kind of
that
box us in.
Yeah. And even before, cars and coal factories and whatnot, the Native Americans, the natives had called it the Smoky Valley. I think it's because natural fires and their own fires just typically stayed in the area. So it's not like of course, smoke versus carbon monoxide. Smoke is way easier to handle, but smoke, carbon monoxide, and all the things that we have. There's so many cars driving around. I remember the first memory of driving here to Utah. It was basically a 2-lane, 4-lane freeway. Like now it's a 10-lane freeway, or in some areas 12 lanes and 13, 14 lanes. So we've definitely increased our population, and that, of course, here in America means more cars, and we just have really bad air. So that's a big reason why I got electric car, because it made sense, and I love it. It's great. I zoomed a little bit extra fast onto the freeway today.
I won't pass that along to my friends in the police department. So.
Hey, I didn't really break the speed limit. I just went faster to the speed limit. That's
just
all.
Fun to accelerate, right?
It is. It is, and it was only onto the entrance to the freeway, right? So that makes it a little bit easier.
That's probably one of the most fun places to drive in a Tesla is the on ramp to the
freeway. It was really fun. So you've got a Tesla as well, right?
I do. Yeah, I've had it for a year, and like the novelty of driving a car that just instantly goes when you push the pedal, it just hasn't worn off.
Yeah.
So
which model do you have?
It's the Model 3. So
cool.
Same as yours. So I've got the long range battery, which I didn't necessarily care about having the long range all that much. It was just I wanted to get in before the tax credits started to downgrade, and so I got in at that point. But I've loved it, and had it on autopilot for a road trip down to St. George, and it was like a life altering experience to not stress about traffic at all.
Yeah.
If I'm in the left lane, somebody kind of cuts me off to go past a truck. The car just handles everything, and I can just listen to my podcast and everything. So. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah, same here. I've had it for a little bit over a week, and I probably every time I'm on the freeway, I pretty much put it on autopilot and full self-driving. That's different. Yep. There's the difference between the two. And I got it on Mad Max mode to where it automatically switches lanes for you. You don't have to hit the turn signal to approve the lane suggestion. And sometimes I'm like, no, I want to stay in the fast lane. Why are you putting me in the...
I haven't played around with that setting all that much. But
it's a little annoying because I know the fast lane goes faster, but it's saying, oh, this is a passing lane. So it moves me over. But the first world problems that we have with our electric cars. Huge benefit. I mean, you have solar panels, I have solar panels, right? Essentially, we're getting free gas. That to me was logical there. And then also the other aspect is, I plan to rent mine out.
Oh, yeah, kind of send it out as like a robotic taxi
kind
of
thing?
That
too. Or... But that's like at least 2 years away.
Okay.
But I plan to rent it out like on a daily basis, and so I can actually make money off of it.
Gotcha.
Because I work here. I don't really need the car every day.
Is it Duro or
Turo?
Or Turo.
Yeah, Turo.
That's right.
Yeah. So every big purchase I've had, the idea is that it pays for itself.
Yep.
So that's the plan. We'll see how that goes. I've heard a lot of horror stories though, so you got to be careful. Well,
try it out and then let me know how it goes.
I will let you know, and then we'll flood the market with Teslas. So I do have at least one. Well, we'll just say one last question. Okay. So, and this is a personal question. Me coming to you as a non-Orem citizen. I'm still an Orem citizen though,
you're
right?
You're still an Orem citizen, even though you're not like on paper as such as of yet. But
not yet.
We'll get that.
We'll get there. So. I need to go to the DMV. That's where I do it. The DMV. Can I change it there or?
Well, it depends. So you might want to do the DMV first, or I should say the driver license division, and then you can go to the...
We don't call it DMV here?
I think they have it separate because they have one that's for registering your vehicles and then one that's for driver's licenses.
Okay.
So make sure you go to the driver's license one.
Okay.
And then if you can't register to vote there, you can go down to the county offices and do it there. In fact, if you want to vote in this election, you're probably better off just going to the county offices.
Okay.
You can do it in advance, or there's more information on my website if you want to go there for that. But yeah, I believe Utah also has election day registration if you just wanted to do it on election day at the city center.
Sweet. I can get my concealed carry. Finally. I'll have to retake the class because I think it's been over a year. Or almost a year, I think. But anyway. Okay, so I'm your citizen. I'm your constituent. Is that the right word? There you go.
Nailed it.
So I have flooding, and in fact the neighbor has flooding in front of our along the curb, along the street. And partly is because my house kind of has a little weird turn in front of it, and so just gets stuck there. And then for him, he's actually got a drain in front of his driveway, but for whatever reason the water gets stuck halfway there. So where do we go? How do we get that?
So is this an issue that happens every time it rains, or is it from somebody's sprinkler system?
Rain, snow. I mean, we get a large amount of snow right here because when it does melt, it gets stuck, and so if it doesn't fully melt, it just refreezes and builds back up right here.
Yep. Okay. So the long version is we've got a stormwater division that's part of Public Works that handles all those kinds of things. So they'll, they can assess to see if the drainage systems are set up properly, or if there's like a clog in the system that the drain's just not functioning as it's supposed to. The short version is call 311. and talk to them, and then they can sort your question through, all the right departments and things like that. So
even if I have a California number still, if I dial 311, is it area?
In theory, it'll triangulate your position and figure out, like, okay, he's in Orem, that should go to the Orem 311 system. I would say worst case, you might get routed to Provo, depending on where you're at, something like that. But you can also go to orem.org/help, and it has the direct number, so that even if you're not in Orem, it'll still go to that 311 center.
Okay.
But what we've done over the last year is we've taken I was just talking to one of the 311 center people today about this. We've kind of taken this cross-functional team from all these different departments to figure out, okay, what types of questions do we commonly get from the public, and how do we build this knowledge base of information up so that when somebody calls, we can point right to where that answer is or who to contact about that. So I've loved just kind of having that one-stop shop for pretty much any question you have at the city level.
Cool.
That's more like an administrative type or question. If you have a policy question, obviously feel free to reach out to me or the other council members anytime.
Yeah.
But yeah, any of those types of issues, 311 Center is great.
Sweet. I have never heard of that before. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. The only way that I'll know is by having more candidates on my podcast.
Fair enough.
No, that's good. No, and I'm probably more people know. I just don't pay as much attention as I need to local. I mean, I know like there's been recent talk on State Street and obviously the property tax that definitely affects me because I have a house, right?
Yep.
So I definitely paid attention to those elements. But sometimes I think the cool part about the cities that, and this includes not just the council members, and the mayor, but there are the departments work their butts off.
Yeah.
To really serve the city.
Yep.
I mean, and are they perfect? No. And including elected officials, are they perfect? Absolutely not. And I think that's the cool part about local as well, is that these are people that are really running not for fame. They're running to really serve. And that's something that even before you came on, I could tell that was the case. I mean, last week I didn't have a guest and you were just tagging, hey, anyone want to come on? That meant a lot to me.
Yep.
And that's really cool. And I think you would have done it even if you weren't a council member or if you weren't an upcoming guest. I think from what I can tell, you're that kind of person. And that's the stuff that we need. We need people that can do that. So, all right. So Sam, people that are local here in Orem, and then obviously anywhere else they can go to their local city and they could probably see their candidates. But where can people find out more information about you?
Yep. So my campaign website is just samfororem.com. So SAM, the number 4, orem.com. But you can also get information on all the candidates if you just go to Orem's website, orem.org, and there's an elections page right on there. It's, first thing that you'll typically see when you get to the homepage. Click on that elections button and you'll see a profile for all the candidates, all of our websites, that kind of thing. And I just love that we live in a day and age where all that information is accessible.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
and,
can you imagine 100 years ago? 50 years ago.
Yep. And, we're having a debate, I think it's next Thursday over the Sarah, so you can come listen. But it's whether you're here in Orem or somewhere else, just get involved and kind of listen to what some of these candidates have to say and realize that in a lot of cases, if you disagree with them or you have an idea of how maybe you can improve that, they're probably going to listen to you. Yeah. So, these local elections matter because you have an opportunity to help shape your community's future.
Cool.
So.
And if someone wants to get a sign from you, what do they do?
Oh, yeah, on the website too. So there's information for all that kind of stuff there.
All right. Did you bring a sign for us?
I've got some in my car if you want one.
Yeah,
sure.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. All right, Sam, thanks so much for coming on. samfororem.org?
samfororem.com.
Okay, yep. samfororem.com. We didn't even make it halfway through. You're a very intriguing person, and definitely I want to reiterate, I think you just have a lot of great passion, and you fixed a lot of things. I mean, I'm excited about Utopia. I am excited about the community solar or being completely green for the city. I think that's a great goal that we need more of, and I think you're helping see the local city move forward. So hopefully we get more people like you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
I appreciate it, Scott.
Shop top, shop it over.